In this ClimateGenn episode, we're taking a closer look at conflicts of interest in Brazil, threatening the Amazon rainforest, an essential global ecosystem. As well as the indigenous communities that live within the forest regions, it also threatens all of us around the world. A common phrase we hear these days is, what goes on in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. We also know that what goes on in Antarctica does not stay in Antarctica. It is the same for the Amazon. If it is allowed to collapse, and this is the policy trajectory Brazil is on, then the outcome will be catastrophic for the global climate system. 2 years ago, I interviewed a Chinese climate scientist, Professor Jingfang Fan, working with the Potsdam Institute, who identified a teleconnection between heat from the burning Amazon and the Tibetan Plateau. The transported heat to the Tibetan Plateau via stratospheric jets is accelerating the melt of ice in a region often referred to as the third pole. The heating of the Amazon directly threatens the water security of 1.5 billion people on the other side of the world. To bring us up to speed on the conflicts of interest between what the Brazilian president Lula da Silva says is policy and the projects he is green-lighting, is journalist Monica Piccinini. Monica and her colleagues are covering these issues in depth, and as the spotlight is shot on Brazil for COP30 in Belém, a city within the Amazon region, we get a glimpse of what is really going on, and links to Monica's related articles are also in the notes. In the next episode, I'm speaking with Professor Raymond Pierrehumbert from the University of Oxford. Professor Pierrehumbert co-authored an article in The Guardian very recently with Professor Michael E. Mann from the University of Pennsylvania, specifically criticising the UK government for their research grants into solar radiation management, geoengineering techniques. This is a topic I've covered for about 15 years, and far from fading away, geoengineering is being seen by a growing number of people as humanity's escape route from continued burning of fossil fuels. Thank you to all subscribers and members for supporting this ongoing series of interviews. I have many more in the pipeline, and episodes are available in the members area before going public. If you like, you can also support my work by ordering my book COPOUT, How Governments Have Failed the People on Climate, available worldwide in paperback and from a multitude of online retailers not owned by Jeff Bezos. It remains as relevant as ever in today's world of political malaise. Thank you again. Monica, it's great to speak to you. Thank you very much for taking the time. With the Amazon and Brazil being center stage for the COP this year, can you give us a brief overview of the political governance in Brazil? Because Lula was heralded as the great hope after Bolsonaro was voted out. And then at COP27 in Egypt, he was sort of received a superstar welcome by crowds in the blue zone. More than 2 years into his leadership term, from your perspective, has he fulfilled his election pledges?
First of all, thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak to you about such an important issue, especially because we're approaching COP30. So I'm going to start to explain very briefly about the structure of Brazil's political system, okay? Brazil is the largest country in South America with over 260 million people. So it's a federal republic with a presidential system, and which consists of the union and 26 states and the federal district, which is Brasilia, okay? Similar to the US, the Brazilian government has 3 independent branches, which is the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, okay? The president is elected every 4 years, and then the legislative power consists of the National Congress, which is made up of Chamber of Deputies and the Federal Senate. So the president can actually veto bills, but then Congress can then overturn all these vetoes, okay? Something very important that I would like to mention is that in Brazil, the agribusiness caucus, which call them ruralistas, they are big landowners, okay? They dominate Congress, and they usually push for policies that tend to benefit them. So about Lula's election, basically his election, in my view, and in many people's views, was built on many promises, Nick, including a strong commitment to the climate agenda, okay? But however, it appears that he's capitalized on environmental concerns, along with so many pledges that he's made to protect the indigenous communities and in order to secure votes. For instance, when he was elected, post-election, he decided to form a Ministry of Indigenous People led by Sonia Guajajara, and then to appoint Marina Silva as the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Yet their influence seems to be quite restricted. It seems that if they challenge Lula's goals and plans, they risk their positions and they risk being sidelined. And something else that's very key and important to talk about is that in early February this year, okay, Lula has accused IBAMA, which is the environmental agency, of acting against the government. I mean, this came after IBAMA showed reluctance to approve the exploration of oil and gas at the mouth of the Amazon by Petrobras. Okay. So this oil exploration, this proposed plan to explore oil at the mouth of the Amazon poses many, many risks. Risks to coral reefs, to mangroves, traditional communities, and also risks of oil spills, which could be, have devastating consequences. Additionally, this project is only 500 kilometers from the Amazon River, which, an oil spill would be catastrophic. And also, there are many projects that are a threat to the Amazon, to Brazil, and to the world as well. This includes the expansion of agribusiness. Okay, along with agribusiness, you have pesticides. And then with the new biofuel mandate, you have the expansions of cattle farming, dam construction, and various infrastructure projects. And it's important to recognize that Lula actually supports many of these developments. And a key project for these developments is the reconstruction of BR319 highway, right in the middle of the Amazon, which will have catastrophic consequences for Brazil and for the planet.
The BR319, which is something
Yes.
you've written about, and this is essentially a superhighway. What stage is it at? Can you just tell us where it is right now?
I'll give you a background on what BR319 is, because BR319 highway is a 885 kilometers stretched road or highway, and it connects the capital of Manaus to Porto Velho, and it cuts through one of the most pristine regions of the Amazon rainforest, okay? It was initially inaugurated during the military dictatorship in 1976. It was then abandoned in 1988. It wasn't economically feasible to do this, to keep maintaining it. So it became impassable. And then until 2015, when Dilma Rousseff, her administration, took the decision to introduce a maintenance program, okay, to revive it. So the objective was actually to explore oil and gas and to expand cattle farming in the region, okay? And since then, various governments have been trying to reconstruct a 407 kilometer stretch of the highway, which is called the middle stretch. There have been many, many attempts to do that. And it's important to say, Nick, that at this very moment, a 52 kilometer section of the highway called Lot C, it stands for Lot Charlie, okay? It's between kilometer 198 and 250, has already been approved and signed by Lula himself. But this has no environmental impact assessment being conducted and no consultations with the indigenous people who are going to be affected by this. So in regards to the 407 kilometer stretch of the highway, none of the indigenous people communities have been consulted as required by ILO 169, and as you know, the International Labour Convention, and by Brazilian law. So the principle of free, prior and informed consent has been totally ignored. While some claim these communities have been given a voice, they haven't been able to actually participate, to be consulted and to veto the project, okay?
What's the highway for? I mean, who's going to use it?
It's for many projects within the region. You have, name it, you have oil and gas, you have agribusiness, you have mining, and also you have what they call the development of a bioeconomy. I just wanted to add the reconstruction of BR319 highway is the only infrastructure project in Brazil that lacks an economic feasibility study, which is called the EVTEA, as required by law. So nothing is being done about this.
You said the project's what it's going to be used for, but where's the funding coming from?
They're possibly counting on donors, or some have suggested to use the Amazon fund for this. Many have suggested, many politicians have suggested that, which is, completely absurd.
Yeah, sure.
Some say that the highway can go ahead. Even some NGOs, we've written an article about it. Two scientists, Lucas Ferrante and Philip Fanside and I, we did some investigations. Some say that governance can be achieved and then BR309 can go ahead. But members of the federal police and the Brazilian army have already said that this governance scenarios is utterly nonsense, okay? It will be impossible to monitor an area due to its size, complexity, danger because of organized crime. So this is critical, okay? And basically it's in the interest of politicians, business leaders to push for this project to go ahead. And it's not just nationally, it's internationally as well, Nick.
Well, you mentioned the indigenous people. What sort of proximity is it to them, and what would be the impact on them that you're aware of?
Basically, it would impact 69 indigenous territories and 18,000 indigenous communities across, and they are very, very, very close. And there's a study conducted by Lucas Ferrante and Philip Fanside. It was published in the journal Land Use Policy, and it lists all the communities that are going to be affected by this.
You quoted President Lula's commitment to building the road, but it's obvious that the indigenous people are not going to benefit from this. There's going to be oil extractive projects and so on. I mean, it sounds like a recipe for disaster.
So politicians, business leaders, institutions, even some NGOs, they claim that the communities within the Amazon are isolated and then there needs to be a connection, which is a total lie, okay? And basically the highway is not for the people, it's for the flow of natural resources, pure and simple. So instead of progress, it's going to be total chaos, okay? And something that's very inflammatory and that I would like to mention here to you. They even exploited the COVID-19 crisis in Manaus as an excuse to build the highway. I don't know whether you remember when hospitals ran out of oxygen in Manaus during the second wave of the pandemic in January 2021. So the government ignored warnings by scientist Lucas Ferrante, okay, during the second wave. And he warned the government 6 months in advance that a second wave was arriving. The government chose to ignore this. And then they chose, when the second wave hit, they chose to transport oxygen through BR319, and which was impossible, it was impossible. Instead of using the Madeira River route, which was cheaper, was faster. And then because of this, many lives were lost. And they still claim that the highway would have prevented all those lives lost. They continue to argue that BR319 is vital for security, okay, national security. I mean, the road doesn't even cross any borders. A military general has already debunked this. And now they're using the drought, okay, as an excuse, but the Madeira River is not dry. So it can be used, okay, as an option.
Tell us then about some of the impacts of how this is going to impact people who are based there and more broadly as well, in terms of climate.
Yes. The BR309, if it goes forward, Nick, it won't stop at a single route, okay? It would trigger a network of illegal roads from either side, opening up untouched areas of the Amazon. So there are more than 6 roads already planned for across BR319. One of them is AM366. So if BR319 is rebuilt, it will give loggers, miners, land grabbers, access to the west of BR319. And then you would link also the central Amazon, which is called the Amacro region, which consists of three states. Amacro, it stands for Amazonas, Acre, and Rondônia. So these illegal roads that crisscross BR319 would cause a fishbone effect, okay? Because there are already 6,000 kilometers of illegal extensions already there, so which is already 6 times the length of the highway. Also, it could bring, total devastation, deforestation, degradation, loss of biodiversity. It could increase illicit activities like logging, mining, violence, invasion of indigenous land. Organized crime could increase, which is already taking over the region. And it could lead to the disruption of the flying rivers. You probably know about the flying rivers. They are air currents that, with heavy water, that bring rain to vast areas of Brazil. Without them, you could see droughts that could devastate agriculture, businesses, water supplies, affecting millions of people. To give you an example, it's also important. 70% of the rainfall that supplies the Cantareira system in São Paulo, which is responsible for providing water to the entire state of São Paulo, comes from this forested region. So disrupting the flying rivers would bring Brazil to a standstill. And also deforestation across BR319 could create conditions to the spread of zoonotic diseases, diseases that jump from animals to humans, and increasing the risk of another pandemic even. And there is already an increase in malaria cases across BR319, 400% increase. And there's an increase in oropouche cases. Have you heard about that?
No.
6,000 cases of oropouche between 2022 and 2024. And these cases were concentrated in the Amacro region and has already spread to the state of Espírito Santo, which is in the southeast of the country, miles away from the Amazon.
From what you're saying, it's like the road essentially opens up the heart of the Amazon.
Yes.
And then once you've done that, everything moves in, all of the extractive, the logging and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And with the fragility of the whole system, you're pretty much locking in the worst outcomes.
It will be catastrophic because basically it will bring total devastation. You can't monitor a region that vast. And also, it's not just the complexity, it's also, you have organized crime, taking over the region. So it would be impossible to monitor this. But, some NGOs, most politicians in the region, they are pushing for this to happen. They say, we can provide governance. I mean, this is utter nonsense.
What sort of NGO would be pushing for something like this? Because it's obviously can't be an environmental NGO, for example.
Right. Lucas Ferranti, Philip Fernside and I, we conducted an investigation. And I'm going to tell you the extent of where they're willing to go, okay? For instance, we got hold of a recording from a group of indigenous communities. They told Lucas that they were forced to sign a document produced by an institution called the Institute of Education in Brazil, IEB. This institution basically presented them with a report to sign. In this letter, this report that they were signing, there was a statement affirming the approval of BR319. So saying that they would approve, provided that an extractive reserve was created to protect the Brazil nut groves used by this group. The leaders only became aware of this statement approving the road after they had signed it, okay? And they were instructed by this institution to send this report to Brazil's environmental agency, IBAMA, to Brazil's indigenous foundation, FUNAI, and to the Ministry of Transportation, DNIT, because the interest in rebuilding the road was apparent. So as you can see, there are many forces supporting this project, okay? But they're prepared to do anything.
Obviously, we are coming towards this focus on Brazil and focus on the Amazon and the COP. Uh-huh. How much do you think this will feature in the focus that the government wants us to see when we're in, Belém COP30?
Well, It's a big test. I mean, if you get to go to COP30, first question I suggest you ask BR319 and see who's willing to talk about it. Many scientists, many organizations, many politicians, many business leaders, they don't want to talk about it. I mean, do you see any features in the mainstream media talking about it? I can hardly see it. I would like to add, if you allow me, about the benefits, who will benefit from this.
Yeah.
Oil and gas corporations, including Petrobras, with plans to operate at the mouth of the Amazon, okay? There are other oil and gas companies. Rosneft, a Russian oil and gas company, is in there. They hold drilling rights to about, I think, 12 to 14 oil and gas blocks in west of the highway, which is about 35 kilometers from the Purus River, okay, within the Solimoens Basin. It's a pristine area, larger than the state of California. This is really, and no one wants to talk about it. Other companies that would benefit, it would be like legal and illegal mining. Also, for instance, a Canadian company has plans to explore potash in Altazis, okay? They're investing $2.4 billion in this project in Altazis. And they are known to have bribed the Mura people, various indigenous communities, okay? And the ones that they say have accepted their exploration are the ones who are not going to be impacted directly by it. So agribusiness will have interest in this highway because of the new biofuel mandate in Brazil and the expansions of crops. These companies will be benefiting from it. Companies like JBS, because cattle farming would expand and they will definitely benefit from it. And we saw in 2024, 30 million hectares were burned in the Amazon. Livestock farming, cattle ranchers were clearing land, and cattle farming is responsible for at least 88% of deforestation in the Amazon. So yes, one last thing I would like to mention is that organized crime is taking over the region, and BR319 cannot go ahead because it would be the end of the Amazon, literally.
We had so much media focus on the destructiveness, the sort of Trump-likeness of Bolsonaro that everyone thought it had drawn to a close with the Lula era.
Yes.
But what we're seeing here is really a sort of continuation, and the idea that the Amazon is an economic resource for extraction rather than a vital part of the whole Earth biosphere. It's really, really worrying to hear all of this.
Lula's public statements on the environment at the moment and the rights of indigenous communities, and they don't actually align with his policies. I'm really sorry. We're all very hopeful when he was elected that he was going to be strong and veto bills. I mean, he has partially vetoed some bills, not fully, okay? We have to understand that. And behind his rhetoric is a highly sophisticated communications team that he has and that shapes his image. And it doesn't actually reflect the reality of his administration at the moment. So his policies are actually a threat to indigenous communities, okay? And he's very, very powerful. He's very clever. He's very strategic. He has behind him a very strong political and technical network. Unlike his predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro, he wasn't as clever and he wasn't surrounded by technical people. He was surrounded by generals. So this makes it very, very hard, very difficult to challenge Lula's actions effectively. Despite his image, he supports oil and gas expansion. He supports agribusiness. He supports the increase in biofuel mandates, which he has done already. And he's pushing for large-scale infrastructure projects, like, for instance, the Ferrogram Railway. He's pushing for BR319 and cattle farming, for instance. In his administration, more pesticides were allowed to go ahead compared to Bolsonaro's. He supports mining activities, but on the BR front, he has repeatedly stated that the highway is a necessity for Amazonas and for Brazil.
As we put this in the context of COP30, how do you think this reflects on the COP itself? From your perspective of what the COP's meant to be about, what it's meant to be trying to achieve, we've already got problems with the US and so on. How does all of this frame up for Belém?
I think they will try to talk as little as possible about all these topics. And they will actually be saying that, biofuel is clean, for instance, okay? Biofuels are a necessity, is clean energy. They're going to be pushing for the development of a bioeconomy because like any other COPs, they'll be pushing for profitable businesses. I mean, you have mining companies, Valley, in there, pushing for a bioeconomy to be developed. Recently, Valley announced, alongside with a few NGOs, one of them is the one that we mentioned in our article, that they will be training journalists on COP30, on bioeconomy, and on the Amazon. I mean, this is a total conflict of interest.
And it seems like the BR319 is a kind of central piece of the jigsaw of how these plans are brought to fruition.
I'd like to add one more thing, if you don't mind. We have to be very, very careful here, Nick, because criticizing Lula's environmental policies shouldn't be used as a justification to support the far-right movement in Brazil. This is a very fine line. We have to be really careful. It's our job to criticize all the wrongdoings, but we should be really careful about this. We shouldn't open doors for the far-right to grow in Brazil. And also Brazilians deserve much better than choose between the lesser of two evils, if you know what I mean.
Well, that's another problem that we have around the world, I think. We'll definitely have to revisit some other issues that are other parts of the Amazon, Brazil jigsaw environmental puzzle. But thank you very much for speaking to me.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you.
If you are concerned about the future, then why not travel with me through every COP conference from COP21 in Paris to COP28 in Dubai by ordering my book, COPOUT, How Governments Have Failed the People on Climate. In COPOUT, you'll gain insights into what is actually going on in these supposed world-saving conferences and how we have ended up in this dire era of dangerous consequences. You can order COPOUT via the link in the notes or on any online bookstore worldwide, in paperback or audio version.